Have you ever looked at the beauty and intricacies of an animal, bird, or fish, and asked yourself, could this really have been created through a process of evolution?
Well, yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. It is good for us to go back and review our own ideas to see whether or not they align with the facts and with the evidence. That is the way that Darwin developed his idea. You see, it wasn't anything new, the concepts that we all shared a common ancestor and that animals changed over time. That was in no way new. However, previous renditions had multiple issues in what they suggested. For example, one idea suggested that we, inherited all traits gained throughout life from our ancestors. And of course, the moment that you point out how a scar, for example, isn't passed on to your offspring, that was the end for that one. However, Darwin came along and he gave it a reasonable method of adaptation. He filtered through the junk and the issues, and he compiled a natural system which would allow for gradual change via natural selection, thus giving that field of biology unstoppable force that would then go on to be developed even further. So I would agree, it is good for us to go back and review the evidence. Greetings there and welcome people of YouTube. This is Essence of Thought, and of course I'm doing another creationist mockumentary, and this time it is one named Incredible Creatures That Defy Evolution. So in sticking with my opening statement, let us go back and review the evidence.
Could time plus chance come together and give us all the beauty we see in the world?
You're kind of missing something there, buddy. It's called natural selection. That is why it's called evolution via natural selection. It's kind of vital. It's in the title. So, all chance did was get the ball rolling for natural processes to work over an extensive period of time to build up something quite advanced. But how would this be any different to the chance that God existed and the chance he decided to create the universe? It is no different. That is until you bring in Occam's razor to cut out the God hypothesis.
Hi, I'm David Hames, and in the next few minutes, we're going to take a close look at some animals that are going to shatter that very idea.
Oh, okay, you're just the intro sort of presenter guy. You're not really that important. That's fine, that's cool. I can't expect everyone over at Real Productions to actually know what the hell they're talking about, so let's just continue with the unoriginal, musically hyped intro.
I want to introduce you to Dr. Jobe Martin. Dr. Martin has had a very interesting background. He's been a college professor and a dentist. He even served on the dental crew for President Johnson's Air Force One and the presidential fleet. But for the past 20 years, Dr. Martin has been lecturing students on incredible creatures that defy evolution. But it wasn't always this way. Dr. Martin, out of a scientific and medical background, once believed in the theory of evolution.
So, Dr. Martin has a doctor in dental medicine, i.e. he has a DMD. He also has a master's in theology. I'm wondering, what qualifies him to speak out about evolutionary biology more than, say, a professional on evolutionary biology? Also, it would be once accepted, the theory of evolution, as science professionals don't go running around believing in things without the evidence. So, yeah, just going to point those things out.
Evolution, as I was taught, it all started with a thing called the Big Bang.
What?
They say this Big Bang went kaboom and shot out hydrogen gas, mostly, and the gas somehow turned to dust, and the dust condensed down into planet Earth. The evolutionists say it started dry, and then over millions of years, volcanic activity produced the water, and then in some little pond of this water somewhere on planet Earth, these inorganic chemicals got together, and they were zapped by some kind of X-ray or something else, and all of a sudden you have this little speck of life. And they say that was about 3.5 billion years ago. And then that little speck of life somehow, over about 3 billion years, became the first cell, which was somewhere around 600 million years ago. And then that progressively became beautiful you.
Key thing here. As I was taught. Well, quite clearly you were taught wrong. And I'll show this. Let me edit out everything that you just said that does not have to do with evolution, and only leave the evolutionary aspect. And let's see how long it lasts.
And then that progressively became beautiful you.
Only 4 seconds out of a 1-minute rant. This is why creationism in schools is so dangerous. It teaches institutional misinformation and stupidity. Either that, or you are deliberately lying. You know, one thing is clear. You never did accept it, because what you think you accepted is not it. Had you said this in public and your scientific peers heard about this, there would have been an utter uproar, and they likely would have stepped in for some form of scientific intervention to explain to you the actual definition and field of evolution.
Dr. Martin's traditional scientific background would go through an evolution, rather a revolution, as he joined the staff as a professor at Baylor Dental College. This was the beginning of the evolution of a creationist.
Huh, what a coincidence. I managed to get all those videos as well.
And so in the fall of 1971, I went to Baylor in Dallas and gave my first lecture. It was on the evolution of the tooth. And I talked about how these fish scales gradually migrated into the mouth and became teeth.
This is actually correct, you know. Various jawless fish, like the thelodonts, had scales composed of both dentine as well as a very enamel-type substance, which has given rise to the theory that this is the way that teeth developed, from the scales around the outside of the jaw. So, you know, I'm actually quite impressed to hear something factual and reasonable in a creationist mockumentary. Maybe it's not going to be so bad after all.
A couple of my students came to me after class that day and said, "Dr. Martin, have you ever investigated the claims of creation science?" Well, that was 1971. I'd never even heard of it. At that point, I'd been a Christian for about 5 years.
Well, on first glance, I find this a little sketchy, as the evolution versus creationist argument has gone on since, well, World War I, where it is actually argued that the usage of, you know, chemical warfare was down to a brutish society having developed because of the teachings of evolution. The same happened following World War II around eugenics, where they tried to equate natural selection with artificial selection. Artificial selection having existed long prior the theory of natural selection, which really made no sense then. So, you know, then we hit the Cold War era, and as bad as it was to be an atheist then, America couldn't fall behind in the science department. So suddenly things changed, and the evolutionary field took great strides forward. Yet, with each one, it grew more and more paranoid, as said strides seemed to lead further and further away from God, and to making him unnecessary, and the whole idea of America's own propaganda backfiring on America, making it equatable with communism because it's leading people away from God. But luckily the science won out. But I still thought you would have heard of the Epperson versus Arkansas case of 1968, in which Epperson sought to overturn the Arkansas ruling of 1928 to not allow the teaching of human evolution in schools. So I thought you would have heard of that one. Or how about the formation of the Creationist Research Institute 5 years prior, or should I say the Creationist Research Society 5 years prior, it wasn't the Institute yet. You'd have to be pretty closed off from the field at the time not to notice these things going on, especially considering you lived in a neighboring state.
And so I'm thinking to myself, where are these guys coming from? I've never heard of this. And so I said, sure, I'll look into this with you. And I'm thinking, kind of as a cocky young professor, I'll blow these guys away. Well, they asked me to start studying the assumptions that the evolutionists make. And in all my years, 8 years of scientific education, I had never had a single professor tell me about an assumption. And so we started looking at the assumptions.
Well, I'd like to know what these are beyond the ones that every single human makes, i.e. that the universe is real, it is observable, it is measurable through our senses, or the devices we have made to aid and assist our senses.
And I began to realize they're making some claims here that really the assumptions aren't valid when they tell us rocks are very old and all these kinds of things.
Wait, what? The field of biology, that is evolutionary theory, makes no claims about the age of rocks, which is part of a field of geology. Geology is standalone in that sense. Yeah, the two go together, and yeah, the evidence for both points towards the same, but evolution has nothing to do with the age of rocks. It does not state the age of rocks are at this age. I think you've become dazed and confused because all of these areas of science are agreeing with the theory of evolution, therefore you've learnt to see them as one and the same, when really, no, they're different fields, they just happen to agree.
And then they asked me to start studying some animals and see if I thought that animal could evolve.
Certainly more relevant, however, it seems like they were taking advantage of your very specified field. I mean, you are a dentist. You have a doctorate in dentistry. So dealing with the evolution of teeth in fish is one thing, but all other areas of evolutionary biology, it does seem to me like they were taking advantage of your very specified field. Since then, we've had the creation of the internet, and if there is something that confuses us, we can go and check it out so easily these days, and thankfully so. I'm really sad that they didn't have access to this at that time, and you didn't have access at this time, because you could have broadened your knowledge so extensively into the field of evolution if you had wanted to put the time into it and had the access to the resources to do so. You can't be held accountable for being taken advantage by because of your very specified field.
Well, the first thing that we really studied together was this little bug called a bombardier beetle. And this little insect, it's about a ½ inch long, and it mixes chemicals that explode.
Well, firstly, this little bug is actually 500 separate species of little bug over 4 different tribes. Secondly, the defense occurs when hydroquinone is mixed with hydrogen peroxide, a little bit of water, and also a catalytic enzyme, which then creates a chemical reaction which quickly results in the mixture reaching the boiling point of water. This then evaporates part of the mixture. That evaporation, of course, creates pressure, and that forces the rest of the chemicals out of the end of the insect and its abdomen.
So I began to think, okay, now how would that evolve? Let's say if evolution is true, and you're evolving along here, and you don't have a defense mechanism, because that is the defense mechanism of the bug. So if evolution is true, it had to somehow evolve that. So let's say it's coming along here. Well, the first time it evolves the explosion, what does it do to the bug? Boom, you just splattered your bug, okay? So splattered bug pieces don't evolve. So I thought, how could this have happened? Well, it doesn't blow itself up. It has another little factory inside itself that manufactures chemicals. A chemical acts as a catalyst so that when you squirt that chemical in with these other chemicals that are like in neutral, you get your explosion. Well, the first time it manufactured that little chemical, here it goes again, blew itself up again. But it doesn't. Why? Well, because it has like an asbestos-lined firing chamber. And even then it would blow itself up if it didn't have somewhere for the explosion to go. So it has twin tail tubes. And it can aim these tail tubes all the way up, out the side, out the front. let's say a spider is coming up toward its side and it doesn't have time to turn around and shoot. It can just take its little gun turret and aim it out there and shoot. The explosion on this little bug, all you hear, if you're listening as a human, you hear this pop. But scientists have now put that explosion in slow motion. And it's like about 1,000 sequential little explosions, but they're so fast, all we hear is one pop. And so you think, well, now, why would that be? Well, that was a curious thing for the scientists that study this little bug. A lot of them are at Cornell University, some other places. And what they discovered was that if it was just one big pop, the little bug, if he's shooting like a spider, let's say over here, and he goes room, bang, and shoots it, he's going to pop himself right out of there. It's like lighting a burner on a jet engine, so he's out of there. But as long as it is a sequential explosion with his little legs, he can hang on. How would evolution explain a sequential explosion? This little bug messes with all the theories of evolution. There is no way a slow, gradual process is going to produce this bug. There's no way even the newest theories of evolution, like punctuated equilibria, which means evolution happens very fast. Well, there's no way that will explain this little bug. I began to realize, how could this particular little animal, for instance, evolve? It needed all of its parts, it needed everything there all at once, or you just don't have the animal.
This just really shows your ignorance of how evolution operates outside the dental field. Remember those scales on the fish? They gradually move from the outside of the mouth over generations to the inside of the mouth. It did not happen over a single generation, and neither did what happened with the bombardier beetle. If you have ever picked up a beetle, you'll probably know that very often they release foul-smelling chemicals, and one of them is hydroquinone. And it's one of those ones that you get on your hands, etc. You smell it, and it's not pleasant. Some of the bastards have upped the ante, and some have even started mixing hydroquinone with hydrogen peroxide, as it makes an even nastier mixture, so deters more predators. This increases survival, they go on to live. This is all very basic up to this point. Now, let's hypothetically say that a beetle gets a mixture of hydroquinone as well as hydrogen peroxide, as actually does exist out in the world of beetles, but also develops a cataclysmic enzyme which allows for a chemical reaction to occur. Now, due to the enzyme not being as intense as it is found in bombardier beetles, it would not have the same effect. It would not explode under pressurized conditions. It would just probably fizz and burn. And remember, where the mouth is and the teeth of the creature that's trying to eat you, you've got the nose and the eyes right there. This doesn't have to go far just to be an advantage. It won't deter everything, but it will deter most things. So you've got one that just has a very basic chemical reaction. And gradually that opening becomes a bit more of a pit and it starts working away. And eventually this would allow for the internal aspects of the bombardier beetle to gradually develop over generations as the chemical gets more and more intense. If the chemical got too intense too rapidly, the beetle would die. But those who didn't have the enzyme that was too intense too quickly would still survive. Therefore, the enzyme would only get as intense as the beetle could ever manage. Therefore, it is entirely plausible.
And my stomach started to churn, if I really want to be honest. And my wife would tell you, my stomach churned for 5 years. It took a 5-year struggle for me to begin to flip the way I think, from thinking in an evolutionary way.
Well, due to the facts that you quite clearly show a complete lack of understanding of what evolution actually involves, i.e. slight changes over a number of generations, I would argue that you never started from the evolutionary perspective to begin with. It seems that you started from, at the very most, a very bastardized version, a reiteration, likely given in a hostile environment to the theory of evolution.
To thinking in more, this animal or little creature, little bug, whatever, was created fully formed, just like it is, because that went against everything I'd ever learned.
It's sad that your story has people relying on your ignorance to take advantage of you, and it's sad that you didn't have the access to the resources we have today. I also feel sad for anyone who actually purchased this, as quite frankly, already it's not turning out to be as good as I hoped at the start. So yes, this is the end of the first episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Please don't forget to like and share this video, as that's what makes the channel. I need you guys to go out there to share this video, as it really does help me in the end. So yes, this is Essence of Thought, hoping you are all doing okay. Take care and out.